Another week here. It is Monday, October the 19th, and let's get started. Okay, in Seattle, looks like we're going to have more rain. Surprise, surprise. Not a lot of rain, like you see 0.2 inches, 0.08 inches on Tuesday and Wednesday, and a little sun on Thursday, and then back to showers. But looks like maybe next weekend we're going to a little break. No rain in sight for next weekend. So hopefully the forecast will hold true. Then and now, hey, let's see, 2 weeks out or 16 days out before the election, CNN looked like the Electoral College projection was like in 2016 and what it looks like now. So here's a story from CNN's anchor and reporter, John King.
16 days to Election Day, and here is the biggest question. Can Donald Trump change this map? Can Donald Trump find a path to victory, meaning a path to 270 electoral votes? You see how we have it right now, lopsided for Joe Biden. 290 electoral votes now, either solid or leading Biden's way. Only 163 for President Trump. So he needs to engineer a huge comeback. Look at the toss-up states on our board, plus Maine's 2nd congressional district. Just look at these toss-up states. Let's assume they've all voted Republican before. They all voted Republican in 2016. Even if Trump won Iowa, won Ohio, won North Carolina, won Georgia, and won Florida, even if he swept the toss-up states on our board, it would still not be enough. Joe Biden would still have the lead. Donald Trump's hill is steeper than steep because Joe Biden is competitive in every one of these states. And yet, Democrats are nervous, warning against complacency, worried they have seen this movie before. 16 days out, here's the biggest question. Can you find a viable path to victory for Donald Trump, a viable path to 270 electoral votes? Well, it's incredibly difficult because of the state of play right now. We have Hillary Clinton at 307 electoral votes, Donald Trump at just 179. Takes 270 to win. Can Trump turn it around? Yes, but it would be extraordinarily hard. With us this Sunday, Lisa Lair of the New York Times and NPR's Asma Khalid. That's a little creepy when you look back at the flashback, but that is where we were 4 years ago on this day. The question, Asma, is the Biden campaign sent out this email from the campaign manager yesterday to supporters and donors saying, don't believe the numbers. Please don't believe the numbers. But one of the interesting things about this race that makes it different is the stability. If you go back to Joe Biden's lead, this is NBC Wall Street Journal polling, a 12-point lead over Donald Trump at the beginning of the year. There you go, right there, a 9-point lead now if you play it out there. So it's stability in the lead. If you look at the biggest, most important voting group in America, that is women voters. Let me try to slide this one over here. Look at this. This is the gender gap, NBC Wall Street Journal numbers. It was big at the beginning of the year. It is even bigger now. So there are comparisons to 2016, but there also are big differences, including the stability of the Biden lead.
That's right. I mean, I think, for a long time over the summer, I was looking at some sort of inflection point, trying to see if there would be an inflection point. And really, I would say the storyline of the summer leading into the fall has been the remarkable consistency of the polls. That being said, I also think that there are key demographic groups that Joe Biden seems to be doing better with than Hillary Clinton was ever able to do. And chief among them, to me, honestly, John, perhaps the most fascinating demographic group is white voters. We recently did a poll, the NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, that actually showed Joe Biden winning with white voters. That is a phenomenal statistic, if true, because no Democrat in recent presidential history has been able to win white voters. I would say I hear the same in my reporting when I was out there doing, interviews with, say, young, disaffected, disillusioned Black and brown voters. They may not like Joe Biden, but they understand the stakes are very different than they were in 2016.
Right, and that is a big difference in the sense, Lisa, that you have an incumbent president. Hillary Clinton was viewed by some voters as the incumbent, I guess, because she had been Obama's Secretary of State. But you have an incumbent president in the middle of a pandemic, and the American people have cast a pretty decisive verdict. They don't like what they have seen from the president. And to that, Joe Biden tries to almost send the message, I'm not flashy, but I'm steady. Listen here to part of his message is, when the president speaks, you must be able to trust it.
The words of a president matter.
Absolutely.
No matter whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, they matter. And when a president doesn't wear a mask or makes fun of folks like me when I was wearing a mask for a long time, then, people say, well, it mustn't be that important.
I always joke, my first campaign was 1988. Michael Dukakis said this election is not about ideology, it's about competence. I guess he was 30 years ahead of his time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the message that Joe Biden has had since the beginning. He's cast his candidacy as sort of a return to normalcy, where voters don't have to think about what's coming out of the White House every single day, and they can escape this chaotic tone of this administration, a tone that and a feeling that's only escalated in the midst of this extraordinary pandemic. But I also think it's really important to remember something else about 2016, which was that then, as you point out, Donald Trump was, of course, running against Hillary Clinton. And when you look at the numbers, you had a race between two of the most divisive, polarizing candidates that the country had seen in a really long time. That is not this race. I mean, I've talked to people who have run focus groups for both candidates. And those who ran focus groups for Hillary Clinton recounted voters giving this tortured sort of explanation of her personality and whether they could vote for her. And even if they didn't like Trump, they felt like maybe Hillary Clinton had been in the public eye in a divisive way for too long. And when I've talked to people who've run focus groups for Joe Biden, they say what they hear from voters is that people don't know a lot about him, but, they like him. So he has a very different brand, a very different reputation in the American public. And that's really helping him in this moment.
You have both spent time in recent days talking to the people who drive American politics, and that would be women. Women will be 50% plus, probably 52, 53% of the electorate nationally. It'll be around that number, higher in some states as we get through it. Asma, this is from a piece you did. I think we trust him after seeing what he's done. That's a lot of our reservations. I don't know that we like him, but our goal isn't be liked, it's to be respected. That from Linda Holloway out in very important Bloomfield, Michigan. She's a Trump supporter. And Lisa, this is from your reporting. In the last 4 years, my children have grown and developed more than he has in regards to the way he speaks to other people, the way he speaks about other people. That from an Ohio voter who's going to vote for Biden now, who voted for Gary Johnson last time. Asma, to you first. When you talk to these women, especially suburban women, who, again, that is why Nancy Pelosi is Speaker. The suburban revolt against Trump in 2018 changed America. The question is, will it change America again?
Mm-hmm. So, I was out in Michigan and I specifically spent time in two key congressional districts that did flip from Republican to Democrat in 2018. And what I consistently heard from, you could call them suburban women, right? This is a key demographic that the Donald Trump had been pleading to support him. They said that they were sort of awakened to politics in 2018. Many of them are energized and engaged far more so this election cycle. I think where Donald Trump still retains support in the suburbs is among sort of a key core base of women who say, we don't like how he speaks, but we're still going to back him. The challenge for him is less than 50% of the public. And really at this point, he needs to be expanding the base. He has shown no sign specifically among suburban women that he's capable of doing that.
And Lisa, your voter there is important because the third-party candidates are not polling anywhere near like they did last time. So you have a Johnson supporter from 16 who's a Biden supporter now. In the newspaper today, you also write about other disaffected Democrats or independents who couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton who can vote for Biden. So as we talk about Trump trying to find new voters, Biden may have a pool too.
Right. When we look at the numbers for people who voted third party, which, as you point out, isn't as strong and it doesn't have as strong of appeal this time around, or didn't vote at all in the 2016 election, a lot of what we're seeing is those people are in higher numbers going to Joe Biden. But I do think, as you point out, the suburbs will be key here. Republicans have really never won a presidential race in recent history without winning the suburbs. And part of what's happening here is the suburbs are changing. I think Donald Trump, when he tries to, talk about suburban housewives and law and order and win back these areas of the country, the suburbs, he doesn't quite have a sense of what they are now. They're increasingly diverse. They're the bulk of America. These are areas that have followed a lot of the demographic trends that are hurting the Republican Party in the long term. And so the question is not only whether Donald Trump will lose these areas and perhaps cost himself the presidency, but whether Republicans can win them back, or are these voters lost for the Republican Party for a very long time?
That's one of the fascinating questions we will deal with in the next 16 days and then beyond. Asma, Lisa, grateful for the reporting and the insights.
That was a good recap of what things look like from Electoral College 16 days out. I am very confident. I know the Biden campaign doesn't want to be overconfident. They're telling people, act like we're 20 points behind. And that's how we should, all the way to the end. But I feel very good about where Biden is right now. Here's a really good story. I like these stories about MidWestern towns. And this particular town, Dayton, was still recovering from the 2008 recession. And they actually had their best 2 months economically the beginning of this year, January and February, and then COVID hit. So here's a really good story about how Dayton has had to deal with the COVID-19 economic hit.
It has been more than 6 months since the CARES Act was passed by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and signed into law by President Trump. The law included nearly $140 billion to help state and local governments cover costs related to the coronavirus pandemic. Whether or not they need more is now one of the biggest sticking points in reaching an agreement on a new COVID-19 relief package. With less than 3 weeks until the election, it seems less and less likely that any deal will be reached. Tonight, we began a series of 2 reports from 2 different cities here in Ohio. We look at how they were affected by the crisis and how they are approaching the uncertainty of funding their cities amid falling revenues. We begin in Dayton. Earlier this week, a few dozen volunteers gathered to clean up the area around the site of the future Gem City Market. It's a nearly 16,000 square foot food co-op and retail space being built on Dayton's west side. A food desert that has only one grocery store serving more than 40,000 people. Kenya Baker is the Community Engagement Director for the Gem City Market.
And we'll have about 6 residential-style cooking stations with appliances, and we'll have members from the community that come in and actually teach how to make a lot of the produce that we haven't had access to.
This nearly $6 million project is scheduled to open early next year. It's a bright spot in a Rust Belt city that was still recovering from the housing crisis more than a decade ago when COVID-19 hit.
It's pretty heartbreaking timing, frankly. January and February before COVID were 2 of the best months Dayton's ever seen economically since the Great Recession.
Democrat Nan Whaley has been Dayton's mayor since 2014. When the country came to a screeching halt this spring, Whaley, like many mayors around the country, was facing a daunting public health crisis and a budget crisis.
People didn't know what the budget was going to hold. So I remember late March, Akron did a furlough. And so we followed that furlough, both for safety measures to keep people distanced in our workforce, but also to save some money, frankly.
Dayton initially furloughed 480 people, almost a quarter of all of the city's workers. The temporary layoffs affected every department except for fire and police. Once Ohio started to ease restrictions in May, the city called about 3/4 of those workers back. But seeing a big drop in tax revenue, Dayton offered cash payments for employees to retire or quit.
We started taking, I think, decisions that are going to be helpful for us in 21, but are painful for the community, right? I mean, we had to, to communicate to the citizens of Dayton, like, look, we're not going to have as much staff. We're not going to be able to get to you as quickly, and that's just the way it's going to be. And that's not a message a mayor likes to give, but, there's only so much money, and, we aren't a place that can, budget into the red like the federal government. And so that becomes very difficult messaging and just difficult for the community as a whole.
It was also a burden on the city's workforce. Sean Harbour and Yolanda Sanders both work for Dayton and are officers at AFSCME Local 101, the union which represents city workers. Sanders works as an administrative assistant at Dayton's airport, which lost dozens of workers to voluntary separations, while many others had pay cuts.
The employees are still doing their job. They may not be happy with it, but everybody's still doing their job.
It used to be I could tell you, if you worked hard and did what you were supposed to, this was a job you could retire from. And I couldn't tell anybody with a straight face that anymore.
Harbour is a park and maintenance crew leader and has worked for Dayton off and on for more than 30 years. He says city workers are already being asked to do more with less, and the pandemic is no exception.
We know right now that we've had a hiring freeze. We don't have the supplies or money to do certain projects that might have been on the planning books for this year, and maybe not even next year. So it's been a real struggle trying to figure out how to cope with what in the future may or may not happen.
Dayton has received about $15 million in federal CARES Act funding so far, going towards first responders, COVID-related community assistance for small business and arts organizations, and supplies like PPE. But by law, that CARES Act money has to be spent this year. And Mayor Whaley says without additional federal or state aid, nothing is off the table in 2021.
We're looking at kicking back both police and fire recruit classes, which will put less police and fire on the ground. We're looking at recreation and youth services going completely away. These are the kind of decisions that we're having to make.
But some residents on the west side of the Great Miami River say the city's decisions, even before the pandemic, have often left them behind. Deja Demings was one of the volunteers at the Gem City Market event this week.
She's a lifelong Daytonian and the leader of a group she co-founded called the Dayton Young Black Professionals. And she took us on a tour of West Dayton. About a mile from the site of Gem City Market is the Wright Dunbar Historic District. It's the site of the Wright Brothers Bicycle Shop, now part of a National Historic Park, and the birthplace of African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. Right on 3rd Street is the Entrepreneur's Shop, which sells products made by local vendors. Owner Tay Winston was just in the process of opening the store when the COVID-19 shutdown hit.
I literally ate ham sandwiches every day, and everything I had, I just put it in here. Like, I'm not playing.
Winston said that since she was a new business, she did not qualify for the federal Paycheck Protection Program or city funding for struggling businesses. She's had to dig into her own savings to keep her store open.
Anything that they offer Dayton, they never include Wright Dunbar or up this way. It's all put for downtown.
Deming says the west side of the city, which is predominantly black, has suffered from chronic underinvestment, especially compared to the city's downtown.
There's never been a time where West Dayton has like, hey, let's go make sure West Dayton is okay. That's never the case. That's never been the case. And the more that things are going on with the pandemic and we're still asking for things, shows that even more.
Mayor Whaley acknowledges that the city has long struggled with inequality, but says the pandemic and protests this summer over systemic racism has exposed many to the need to make the city more just.
We still have a lot of work to do, particularly with dealing with inequities. And, we're trying to do that through this year as well. But, the investment into West Dayton has been ignored for 100 years, so this isn't something that's going to change overnight.
Like many mayors around the country, Whaley is urging the federal government to provide more aid to help cities like hers recover. But as lawmakers in Washington continue to debate a new relief bill, aid for cities like Dayton has become an obstacle.
The Democrats, they want bailout money for cities that have been badly run.
And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has called the aid, quote, blue state bailouts.
It just shows just how they just really don't want to support people on the ground. I think they've become completely out of touch on this. We're talking about police officers. We're talking about firefighters. We're talking about picking up your trash. These are not fancy things that we're doing. And the whole idea that they don't want to support local control just shows how far away they've gotten from conservative values.
Montgomery County, which includes Dayton, voted narrowly for Donald Trump in 2016, marking the first time in 28 years it went Republican. And in a state that remains competitive this election, Whaley says whether Dayton will get more federal help is just one more issue weighing on local voters.
That was a good insight stories of a typical Midwestern town, Dayton, Ohio, and the struggles they're going through economically from a huge reduction in tax revenues. All cities, counties, and states are feeling this pinch. Here's a really good ad. It really hits to young girls and actually mothers. It's really the target audience is mothers, and what mother would vote for Trump? No mother should vote for Trump after what he's done to women. So here's a great ad, Maker Project ad called "Girl in the Mirror."
Imagine a young girl looking in the mirror, searching for role models in the world to give her hope that one day she too can make a difference. Now imagine how she feels when she watches women being verbally attacked.
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Maligned.
And this monster that was on stage with Mike Pence, who destroyed her last night, by the way.
Belittled.
I'm not thinking, Mr.
That's
President.
okay. I know you're not thinking. You never do.
I'm sorry?
Harassed.
Blood coming out of her, wherever.
Insulted.
And I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. I'd say,
your daughters are listening and absorbing that message right in front of your eyes. Now imagine a different future for her. A future with a president who doesn't just value a female voice, but chooses one to be his right-hand woman. A strong woman. A woman with compassion. A woman unafraid to take on a bully.
And I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
A woman who not only believes in the American dream, she embodies it. Imagine that little girl in the mirror, because that little girl is yours. And your actions on November 3rd will define who she sees. Vote for change. Vote for her. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Wow, that is a very powerful ad. I really like that ad. It really makes an impact to mothers, obviously, of any mother that has any daughter. It's very powerful, very powerful. Very positive news on the last three, actually since July, the Biden-Harris campaign has outraised the Trump campaign by a lot of money. I mean, in the last month, I think 360 million to like 180 or something like that. It's pretty incredible. And you can see here the big blue circles in those states, those where the Biden-Harris campaign have spent more money than Trump-Pence. And so the little circle, the little red circle is how much money the Trump-Pence ticket has spent. And the only one, let's see, Iowa and Ohio, they're pretty much even. And the only states that Trump has spent more than, and then Biden, is Georgia. You can see they did spend more in Georgia. But you look at all the other swing states, Arizona, Nevada, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, North Carolina, and Florida, all Biden-Harris outspending Trump by a wide margin. And here's a little anecdote here. Mr. Biden has maintained a nearly 2-to-1 advantage on the airways for months. His dominance is most pronounced in three critical swing states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, where he has spent about $53 million to Trump's $17 million over the past month, largely on ads of selling the president's handling of the virus as well as the economy. That's going to make a difference. And so the last 2 weeks, Biden and Harris, including their PACs, including the money that Michael Bloomberg's spending in Florida, they're spending a tremendous amount of money in the airways. They're just gonna out ad the Trump campaign the last two weeks. The Trump campaign is really running out of funds. What happens is when you start dropping the polls, guess what? People start donating to you. People don't want to donate to a losing cause. It's like donating to a sinking ship. So on a positive side, this is what the last 2 weeks Biden and Harris will have a huge advantage going into the last 2 weeks of the campaign season. Here's a great ad. It's actually a perfect final ad. It talks about respect. It talks about dignity. It talks about bringing the country together. It's the closing ad that Joe Biden and Harris's team has produced. And this is from the damage report. John Iderola, he has a little commentary about this too. So I wanted to show you the ad, but also their commentary. His commentary, another analyst who's an African-American liberal.
We're in the closing weeks of this election, and Joe Biden has got an ad out that we're going to show you in full, because I think it really does summarize what his appeal is to people, both the actual appeal that people are feeling and also what he wants them to feel. Now, it is not necessarily perfectly targeted to a progressive like me in terms of being founded in policy, but I do think that it could be pretty effective. So we're going to watch it right now and discuss. This is one of the last Joe Biden ads.
There's a new world coming, and it's just around the bend.
It's time for America to get back up.
There's a brand new morning.
We can build a more perfect union
that belongs to you and me.
The days of divisiveness,
yes, a new world
will soon be over.
That belongs to you and me.
Let's get back up.
Yes, a new world.
We're decent, we're brave, we're resilient people.
Coming in peace.
We can't believe again.
Coming in love.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Okay, so Gary, I'm really excited to see maybe if we disagree on this. What did you think about that ad?
Nina Simone.
Yeah.
I am a huge Nina Simone fan, and so as a progressive, right, to know what she stood for, whoever made that ad was speaking to folks like me right there, right? And I thought it was good. I intentionally did not watch the ad before the show because I felt like I wanted to be authentic in my response to it, right? And my biggest takeaway was hearing Nina Simone and the imagery that matches, right? I think that at the core, all Black people, all American people, all Hispanic people, white people who are of pure intentions want to see that version of America, right? They want to see an America where, you know, our children have a future. They want to see an America where they see men, women, and people of all orientations walking together and progressing in this life and through their journey. And there's some type of human connection to that, right? And to have it laced with Nina Simone, I think it is a powerful image. I hope that it speaks to the heart of people to remind them of what we can be and not what we are.
Yeah. And look, obviously the reality is that, let's say that works, that America that we'll be getting back to is going to have about 1 billion problems that we're going to have to go right back to work on trying to fix. But the reason I think that this is going to be so successful, and this is sort of what I was saying back in 2016, when I know that there was this debate about whether it was better to have, you know, Donald Trump get in rather than Hillary Clinton, so that hypothetically a strong progressive would eventually run against Donald Trump in 2020, that it would give rise to this. And I remember saying over and over, like, people are going to be so beaten down by how unrelentingly awful these years are going to be that they are going to want to just go back to something that seems sane, something that seems decent in any way, something that seems relatively close to the truth, all of these things. And I think that Joe Biden does represent that to a lot of people. People are exhausted. They were exhausted before 2020. The most exhausting decade of our life. And then this has just beaten out the last bit of tolerance they have for any more of this time. And so that ad was not full of a ton of, it wasn't about Medicare for all. It wasn't about a Green New Deal. It wasn't about infrastructure reform. It wasn't about criminal justice. I mean, it was about those things, but not specific. But I think that's what people want right now. That's what we've been given by a combination of Donald Trump and 2020. They just want to feel like we're going to have a person who is not literally among the worst people on the planet right now in charge of everything. And that's why I can see that being an effective ad for a lot of people.
I would agree 100%. I think that, you know, as we wind down, you know, the policies aren't where people are making their decisions today. They're making their decisions based on, you know, is this someone that I believe can manage the job, right? And where are you taking us, right? I think we've had all of the policy debates. I don't think 3 weeks out from an election that people are deciding, you know, based on Joe Biden or Donald Trump's policies that they're going to vote. They're going to vote because they want to say this person has the ability to take this nation where I want it to go. And for conservative Republicans, that's down a rabbit hole of racism and bigotry. And for everybody else, it's towards at least some sort of normalcy and hope for a better tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%. I'm surprised. I thought maybe we would disagree.
That was a good Joe Biden closing ad. That's a good breakdown from the Damage Report. Anyway, have a great start of the week. It's Monday the 19th, and have a great start of the week. 2 weeks from tomorrow, we'll hopefully be able to celebrate the election of our next president and Vice President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.